welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a great one for you. As always, let's get right into it. We're starting at the top with some breaking news out of Russia, where we've seen for the first time a real move by Vladimir Putin to expand forces, trying to add over 170,000 new troops to his army by the end of the year. A sign that things are not going well. We'll take a look at what all the latest analysts have to say about this new move and just the state of the Ukrainian war in general. Meanwhile, Yuan New is running against Dan Goldman. We talked about that race 2 episodes ago. It's a really exciting opportunity for a third party to do some real damage when it comes down to it. A possible working party's family party member in Congress could be very interesting. Meanwhile, after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, Saudi Arabia was cast out of a lot of key institutions of United States society that their lobby had solely worked its tentacles into. Now they're working their way back in. Ben Freeman has that story in a lot of key ways. We'll take a look at the golfing. We'll take a look at academia. Take a look at Hollywood. They're coming back, folks. And meanwhile, progressives debating tanking Joe Manchin's fossil fuel giveaways as they come up for votes in the House. Will they absolutely do it? We will see. But they definitely should. They definitely should. All right. With that being said, let's move on to our first story. And we are looking at the Russia-Ukrainian war here. President Vladimir Putin ordered a pretty sharp increase in the size of his armed forces, a reversal of years of efforts by the Kremlin to slim down a bloated military, and the latest sign that the Russian president, despite heavy battlefield losses, is bracing for long war in Ukraine. And, to be fair to the New York Times, I think, or to Russia, not to be fair to Russia, but just to look at the situation accurately, I think what we're seeing is this is going to be a long war. And anyone who I think was looking at this realistically knew it was going to be a long war from the start, just the way that all three sides here, because I think you got to look at it with three sides, the Russians, Ukrainians, the United States, as we are really the sole funders of the Ukrainian army, and they really would have trouble continuing without United States support. And, a lot of the aid isn't getting exactly where it should be, quote unquote. So I don't. That is certainly a dynamic, but pretty much it is the consensus opinion that they would not be nearly as viable as they are now without the substantial U.S. support the Ukrainian army has been getting. So, this is a war that they have. I think the United States has signaled through multiple times, and in the West has signaled multiple times, telling Zelensky to avoid any kind of negotiated settlement, telling him to keep pushing, telling him to, these really kind of back and forth disputes really on both sides about what territory who gets what territory, who's willing to give up what territory at what time. I've heard, so many different things from both sides here in this conflict. But it is interesting to see now that we are seeing Vladimir Putin gear up for a long time as well. So the decree is signed by Putin and posted on the Kremlin website, and it raised the number of active duty service members by about 137,000 137,000. I thought it said 173,000 in the introduction, to about 1.15 million troops the current size of the Russian army as of January next year, and ordered the government to set aside more money to pay for the increased military. Analysts puzzled over such a sharp increase and whether it could actually be managed. Where are they going to get the money from? How are they going to pay for that? Always asking those questions for sure. It was the first time in 5 years that Putin had issued an order changing the overall headcount of the Russian armed forces. Officials offered no explanation for the move, and there was little mention of it on state television. U.S. military officials this time estimate that Russia has suffered up to 80,000 casualties, including both deaths and injuries during Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Some analysts describe the move as a clear signal that after a full 6 months of fighting, Putin has no plans to relent. This is not a move to make when you're anticipating a rapid end to the war, says Dara Massacat, a senior policy researcher at the RAND Corporation. I mean, honestly, why would they expect? Why would anybody looking at this conflict expect it to? I mean, I really hate to say it, end anytime soon, because it is just not looking like that whatsoever. So, while enjoying a significant superiority in artillery and long-range distance missiles, Russia's forces have been unable to capture these significant territory since the beginning of July, when the city of Lysychansk in the country's Luhansk region of Ukraine, this we're talking about here, fell. Military analysts and reporters on the ground have been attributing the slowing pace to Russia's lack of offensive manpower. So there you see a sharp increase, 137,000 new troops. That is something that they're going to look to probably do. I mean, maybe to almost kind of contradict it to a certain extent, maybe they are looking to put their, make their final move here. It may be something, maybe a little bit far-fetched, but, the fact of the matter is they're building up their forces. Are they planning one final offensive? Because it is going to be definitely more costly for them as a, big world stage country to continue fighting this war year after year after year than it is for the United States, who has this built into the economy. We have been a forever war economy since the end of World War II. And that's just a fact. Like, that is how we have structured our economy. We are designed to fund military projects. That's a big part of how we stimulate our economy. We can do this forever. Russia is taking both huge amounts of manpower hits. 80,000 casualties is no small amount. And if you're looking at the just general morale, just like loss of, just embarrassment to the country, it's going to be a lot more costly for them to keep doing what they're doing at this current point than to say, for example, have, just than the United States, who could keep doing this forever. So, as they build up, I don't know exactly what regions they really obviously plan on taking. Is it a chunk of the East? Are they going to reaffirm Crimea? Do they want to fully get off Donetsk and Luhansk? And is that all they want to do? Whatever, I think it is not a crazy thing to say they are possibly building up to prepare for that final front. They're kind of in a bit of a stalemate right now, but if they can make that final front and then kind of signal that this is all they're going to do, there is. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm saying it's just a possible theory. I'm no expert on military and analysis and war games and all that stuff, but it does not seem, because just based on the looking at what the two sides have and what the two sides don't have, it just seems like it is going to be tougher, much tougher in the long run for, a 10 to 15 year conflict or something. So in the vein of Afghanistan, it's a long, protracted conflict that's going to take a long time to settle out, which, it's hard to see a real resolution unless one side comes to, terms with what they want and actually goes and kind of achieves it. And it looks like, I think, Russia, I think that's what they'd be smart to do. I don't know if that's what they'll actually do, but only time will tell. But we will continue to follow that story here for you, of course, here on Newsflash. So we're going to move on in a very interesting story out of New York. So we talked about this race. This is kind of a district that's southern Manhattan, northern Brooklyn, congressional district. They have their primary on Tuesday. It's a pretty controversial move, but it's a move that I like a lot. This field saw Dan Goldman, who is a heir to a huge fortune, kind of resistance lib type person, pretty much down the line centrist Democrat, who was first on MSNBC, then prosecuted the less memorable Trump impeachment for the perfect phone call. And not even for the January 6th riots. He got the lamest one that literally nobody cared about that happened right before the pandemic. And that made him kind of a hero on the MSNBC vein. The MSNBC cap, if you look at every single county, pretty much every single area he won was in the richer parts of Brooklyn, and he killed it in southern Manhattan, which is pretty much the MSNBC watching capital of the world. other than like Northern Virginia. So he won, but he really only won because there was 3 progressives in the race, one of them being Mondaire Jones, who made a little bit kind of controversial decision to kind of go out of his district and go from the 17th, which is the formerly the 17th, which is Northern Westchester in New York, and go down to kind of a suburban area, not quite upstate. It's for New Yorkers listening, this is a hot point of contention, which is is that area upstate? But I personally think it is not upstate, and he ended up going down to really an area he had no connection. This guy, because Sean Patrick Maloney, who is the chair of the DCCC, just pretty much used all his money and his power to just claim essentially a really easy seat, and then ended up pushing out Mondaire Jones and pushing the progressive out of Congress, which I'm sure he's very, very happy to do. But so in any other year here, so Mondaire Jones gets third. Yuleen, I've been calling her Yuleen New this whole time, but her name is Yuleen New. Do apologize to anyone who may have just been rolling their eyes about that. Yuleen New, she got second. She came very, very close to Dan Goldman, running in the Democratic primary, and there was, I think, one other progressive. She is only ended up trailing Goldman by about 1,300 votes, and she's weighing a general election run under the Working Families Party ballot line. New has not conceded the Democratic primary, and the race won't be certified until September 14th. With 95% of the vote counted, Goldman has about 25.8% of the vote to New's 23%, with 1,306 votes separating the two. There's about 600 absentee votes as of Thursday, still waiting to be counted. I'm currently speaking with the WFP and my community about how we can best represent the needs of this district, said New, because what we can do together is too important to give up this fight. We must count every vote. I'm so grateful for the outpouring of support and all the people who showed up and turned out. Our people need and deserve a voice. So in addition to Goldman and New, the field of the Democratic primary candidates included Mondaire Jones, who we talked about, who moved to the newly redrawn district to run after Sean Patrick Maloney, the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, switched running in Jones's old district. We got Joanne Simon, former New York Assemblywoman, New York City Council member Carlina Rivera, and at one point, Bill de Blasio was even in that race. New supporters have pointed out that New, Jones, and Rivera, who are projected to come in second, third, and fourth, split the progressive vote in the Democratic primary, giving the more moderate Goldman a path to victory. A chaotic redistricting process in New York created a diverse new district which covers much of lower Manhattan, including Chinatown, Wall Street, and the Lower East Side, and parts of Brooklyn. So, you got lower Manhattan, Lower East Side, Wall Street. Those are parts that are going to be very strong for someone like Dan Goldman. Go to Chinatown, Yuleen New, apologies. And Southern Brooklyn is going to be very, very successful. New district includes 2 Chinatowns, one in Manhattan and one in Brooklyn, and she received endorsements and she's a Taiwanese American, so she definitely is going to have some pretty good ties to that community. She received endorsements from several progressive groups and state lawmakers, as well as the Working Families Party. The New York Times actually ended up endorsing Goldman and did not disclose that his family is like best friends with the owner of the New York Times family. So they just kind of let that one slip. Oops, or the guy we have over for dinner all the time. We think he'd be great. Our boss has over for dinner all the time. We think he'd be great in Congress. And, New York Times readers, especially New York Times op-ed page readers, probably know him already. But when it comes down to this, what New should do here is absolutely run. She has the complete political base to it. It is going to be so exciting to actually, this is what progressives have been talking about for so long, right? How do we challenge the Democratic Party from even outside the Democratic Party without even playing by the Democratic Party rules? If a Working Families Party member wins on the Working Families Party line over a Democratic Party candidate, which seems certainly possible, given 18% of the vote went to Mondaire Jones, and I think it was 23 for New, and then 25% for Dan Goldman. That is a very easily surpassable margin that I think should be. If there's no reason not to give it a try. And how freaked out would somebody like Nancy Pelosi be with a Working Families Party member in the House? I mean, come on. All right. So, yeah. Voters know what's at stake, Goldman tweeted Sunday. We need to protect our democracy and our fundamental rights. Everyone's on the line. Everything's on the line. And we need members of Congress who have been on the front line standing up to authoritarianism on the radical right. Uline New was actually standing up during the COVID crisis and, providing mutual aid for people. So that is something that I think voters, maybe in certain parts of the district, they'll vibe with Dan Goldman's case on that, but I think a lot of people are going to respect Dan Goldman Uline New for what she did during the pandemic, which I think is definitely worth looking into. All right, let's go to our next story. It is going to be a very, very interesting one here. This is about Saudi Arabia and the Intercept here. And it starts with a quote by Ben Freeman. They're scary motherfuckers to get involved with. We know they killed Khashoggi and they have a horrible record on human rights, said professional golfer Phil Mickelson of the Saudi dictatorship, which is financing LIV, an upstart golf league and rival of the PGA Tour. In an interview last November, Mickelson explained the league is nothing more than sports washing by a repressive government. Knowing all of this, why would I even consider it? Mickelson posed at the time, claiming that the opportunity was too good to pass up. 10 months later, Mickelson has, in some ways, become the face of LIV Golf. He's played at every LIV tournament this summer, including an event held at one of former President Donald Trump's golf courses. He suffered hecklers and expressed his empathy for 9/11 victims, who wrote a letter to Mickelson and other LIV golfers explaining, when you partner with the Saudis, you become complicit with their whitewash and help give them reputational cover they so desperately crave and are willing to pay handsomely to manufacture. So how much did they pay? $138 million was the price for Phil Mickelson to completely forget about the people who did 9/11. And, if he gets paid by $138 million, even from the people who did 9/11, not too bad, I guess. But Phil Mickelson is not alone. His most prominent peer, President Joe Biden, famously called the Saudi government a pariah on the campaign trail in 2019, and this summer shared a fist bump with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, as he agreed to sell the kingdom billions of dollars worth of weapons. They never stop. They can't quit. They love Saudi Arabia. They love all. I hear so many people. Oh, it's our repressive regime. And what makes it that? Why don't we just go with people? Regimes that don't, have people swinging the town square for being gay. Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, he has some faults. Fidel Castro, Cuba, or he doesn't have oil, whatever. But, Nicolas Maduro has some faults, but I don't think he's hanging people from being gay in the town square. It's just such an arbitrary choice, and just the immense amount of money and control that Saudi Arabia has over our government, and just the fact that they're a convenient partner. We know them. We know we know how to do business with them. We know that they're always going to be very, very willing customers for our arms. They're a powerful ally to have in the Middle East, and we just let them triple tap weddings and school buses with drones. As long as they keep Raytheon, keep Northrop Grumman happy with the free flow of arms across all administrations, across all party lines. That is one thing that is and forever will be completely bipartisan. There was a moment when the Saudi foothold in the U.S., for years supported by extraordinarily well-financed lobbying and influence operations, appeared to be in trouble. Starting in October 2018, the brutal murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi at the behest of MBS sent pretty much every facet of Saudi influence reeling. Some countries suspended arms sales to Saudi Arabia, and more issued travel bans against those suspected of the killing. Several lobbying and public relations firms stopped working for the Saudis. Some think tanks pledged to stop taking Saudi money. Prominent American universities have taken tens of millions of dollars from Saudi monarchy, put those ties under review. Even the sports and entertainment world spoke out against the Saudi regime's brutality. But pretty much the story here is now they've all been coming back. So you got this, talks about this. Corvus Communications, the longest-serving PR agency for the kingdom in America, recently received nearly $18 million from the Saudi government, according to filing the firm made under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. So these people, they were doing this just after Khashoggi was killed. Corvus was the same firm that helped Saudi Arabia resurrect its reputation after it was revealed that 15 of the 19 hijackers in the September 11th attack sailed from that country. In just the first year after 9/11, Corvus received $14 million to provide communication services to increase awareness of the kingdom's commitment to the war against terrorism and peace in the Middle East. Since then, a Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft analysis found that Corvus had received more than $100 million from the Saudi government. So after Khashoggi's murder, Corvus and other firms stepped in again. They've delivered mightily for the kingdom, helping the Saudis, particularly MBS, avoid nearly all punishments for Khashoggi's murder. Congress passed bills that would have ended U.S. support for the disastrous war in Yemen, and multiple bills that would have blocked arms sales to Saudi Arabia. But Trump, who the Saudi regime had long wooed and essentially has Jared Kushner in some kind of, shall we say, arrangement. Trump vetoed every piece of that legislation. Saudi lobby efforts in Congress helped ensure that none of the vetoes would be overridden. The Saudi lobby also took battle for influence beyond the Beltway, launching a faux grassroots campaign that would ultimately touch more than half of U.S. states. The effort was spearheaded by a public relations firm based in Des Moines, Iowa, called Lincoln Shanahan Slifka Group, which contacted thousands of small media outlets, local politicians and nonprofits, small businesses and religious organizations, and even high schools on behalf of the Saudi embassy. The campaign helped the Saudi ambassador and other ties spread a message across the U.S. that the kingdom had deep ties with the American business was in the midst of improvements to its human rights record. And some of the lobbying and PR firms that dropped Saudi Arabia pretty much eventually came back pretty quickly. Richard Holt, a Trump appointee and longtime lobbyist, terminated his contract with the Saudi government a month after Khashoggi's death, telling the Center for Public Integrity, "I'm currently in the process of reevaluating my representation, participant, and retirement." 6 months later, Holt reported a foreign filing that he was once again working for the Saudi government. He's back on that action. BGR Group, same thing. They also terminated contract to represent the Saudi Embassy and Center for Studies and Media Affairs at the Saudi Royal Court, the organization formerly headed by Saud al-Qahtani, whom the U.S. intelligence community named as one of Khashoggi's killers shortly after Khashoggi's murder. But in June, the group was once again representing a Saudi government-funded client, the Muslim World League. So there you go. While public relations firms and lobbyists form the backbone of Saudi influence in America, they're aided by U.S. intellectual centers of powers, often working with D.C. think tanks and prestigious colleges and universities nationwide. These entities they met with my university. They went with Tufts and with everybody. They're so influential, and they will be back. They will continue to have influence for quite a long time. So that is definitely a story to keep an eye on for sure. We take a quick break. In a minute, we'll talk about another exciting opportunity progressives have to affect change in Washington. My name is Spencer Walsh. This is the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, and if you're listening to one of our podcasts, whether it's Newsflash, Hidden History, The Spencer Walsh Show, or something else, ladies and gentlemen, we have one simple request of you. Please be sure to rate us, subscribe to us if you like us, and leave us a comment, because just like all of you, sometimes we need that feedback in our lives, good or bad. We want to hear what you have to say. So please do those steps. Make SWR and content better. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate it, as always. We do want to go to our last story today. This is by Branko Marcetic and the Jacobin Magazine website. A really interesting opportunity for progressives to coming up. Last week, Democrats finally agreed on a major package of climate legislation, but in order for it to actually work, worst parts of it will have to be killed or repealed. There's signs, encouraging signs, that progressives in Congress are gearing up to do just that. The Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act, as everyone should know by now, is the best hope for meaningful climate action in the United States that we have, but also, of course, being that this is the United States, a dangerous series of fossil fuel giveaways that will make the crisis worse. In other words, ensuring its rosy promises on climate are kept means simultaneously undoing the worst parts of the law that the Democratic leadership has struck with coal baron Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Happily, there is some movement on that front. One of the IRA's most outrageous giveaways was a side deal Manchin struck to reform the permitting process for infrastructure projects, a massive favor, and reform, of course, being in big air quotes, a massive favor for both the fossil fuel industry and those, but also, for Manchin, who's desperate to get a 303-mile-long Mountain Valley natural gas pipeline approved in his state. So pretty much, he could not be more transparent at this. Like, the people who pretty much pay my salary and put food on my table, and make my house bigger and make my criminal daughter, happy, or whatever they do, whatever he spends his money on, I don't even want to know. Those people want to pay. These people want a $303 million pipeline through my state, filled with toxic gas, or toxic liquid, and I will do everything I can, including endanger the fate of the world when it comes to climate change, endanger the best bill that's ever come out of the U.S. government on this issue, all because of that. Like, that is who, at his core, Joe Manchin is. And he's getting so much PR, he's getting so much good press at this, but these little poison pills in here, I think should really destroy all of that. Destroying the National Environmental Protection Agency Act has long been on the Republicans' list for wish, but now, in a bizarre twist of history, Democrats are in a position to deliver on that agenda item, says Raghu Rahava, the chair of the House Committee on Natural Resources, said early on in a statement. I wasn't part of any handshake agreement, so I don't feel obligated to support it merely because it's a deal. Not at all. Grijalva is now working on making permitting for a standalone vote so that progressives are free to vote their conscience on the measure without being blackmailed by the prospect of defunding the government. Grijalva's position was echoed by a host of other progressives. Squad member Representative Cory Bush of Missouri, back to 10-term congressman, warning the St. Louis's vote won't be taken for granted. While Representative Rashida Tlaib come out hard and early against the deal. They don't really need too many. And then Pramila Jayapal with a very, shall we say, fitting statement for the way she's been in Congress. The jury is still out. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Jayapal. Appreciate that. I don't think anyone should take these votes for granted, said Jayapal. But, she can say that. She can make all these big threats, as she's so known to do so well. But then meekly fall back in line whenever Joe Biden says, "Oh, just trust me. Come on, Pramila, we got this, right? Come on, man. Come on, Jack. Come on, Pramila. Let's give this to me here." She'd be like, "Okay, Mr. President." Like that is about what we get from the leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus in this term. Representatives Jared Huffman and Ro Khanna also likewise signaled ambivalence about voting for the giveaway. In a more ominous sign for Manchin's deal, even some Republicans have voiced skepticism about backing the bill, threatening to kill what they dubbed a political payback scheme. Manchin will need all the votes he can get. If enough progressives withheld their vote in the House, Democratic leadership will need to find Republican members to replace them, while in the Senate, the reform will need 60 votes to pass. No senators have come out as strongly against the measure as Grijalva, but Bernie Sanders, of course, in the Senate has said against this in the floor speech, he will do everything possible to take on the greed of the fossil fuel industry, suggesting, I'm sure he'll vote no on that. If so, the margin for the passage becomes even tighter in the notoriously gridlocked Senate. Sooner or later, Manchin's deal must be unwound for the sake of a livable future. Scientists have repeatedly and unambiguously said that the new fossil fuel investments in infrastructure have to end right now if we're going to avoid the most catastrophic future outcomes. The Mountain Valley Pipeline alone is not only tipped to emit the equivalent of 26 coal plants worth of emissions every year, but will carry the highly potent greenhouse gas methane, which also has a tendency to leak. And, I'm sure if Joe Manchin's in charge, it's going to be built in the most, cost-free or non-cost-cutting. They'll just do it, perfectly. They're quality will not be spared. They will just go all out. They'll do a great job. That's about what you can expect from Joe Manchin, of course. But meanwhile, a brief glance at the summary of the Manchin deal carries a host of other red flags, from prioritizing the permitting of a rolling list of 25 energy infrastructure projects to weakening the Clean Water Act, setting a maximum time period for permitting reviews, and creating a statute of limitations for legal challenges to projects like pipelines. The vote will be a test for the wider climate movement who have so far successfully used direct action to force the issue on the political agenda in Washington, and for progressives in Congress whose hopes of a far more ambitious climate and social safety net expansion bill last year were dashed when Manchin deceived them into backing the legislation. The good news is the progressives who tanked Manchin fossil fuel giveaway will now not only be on the right side of history, but don't need to feel guilty about not honoring whatever deal was struck. As Lee put it, Manchin went back on his word to get BBB done. We owe him nothing now. And, will the progressives like Ro Khanna and Pramila Jayapal, those softer ones, those are kind of the soft left of the party, will they learn their lesson this time? It remains to be seen. Or will they just, meekly fall in line behind Joe Manchin again? We will see. But until then, it's been Newsflash. We'll be back on Tuesday. It's been fun.